You know what's the strangest kind of loneliness? It's not the kind where you have nobody. It's the kind where you're surrounded by people, laughing with them, talking with them, and still feeling like you're watching everything from behind a glass wall, like everyone else got a manual on how to just be there, and you never did. You're present, but not really. You're listening, but hearing something different, something underneath, something nobody else seems to notice. And the worst part, you can't explain it, even to yourself. Because how do you tell someone that you feel most alone? Not when the room is empty, but when it's full. My name is Philex, and I spend a lot of time thinking about why people feel, react, and protect themselves in ways that even they don't fully understand. If you've ever felt different, hard to truly know, or like you're trying to understand yourself on a deeper level, subscribe to this channel and like this video if it helps you see yourself a little more clearly. Today, we're going to talk about something many people feel, but few can ever quite explain. Why deep thinkers feel alone in a modern society that keeps getting louder, faster, and shallower. But first, let me break apart something most people get completely wrong. People assume that those who feel lonely are people without friends, people who don't know how to connect, or people who are simply too shy to open up. They think loneliness is a problem to be fixed. Go out more, talk more, be more open. But the truth is far more complicated than that. There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from a lack of people around you. It comes from a lack of depth in those connections. And this is exactly the kind of loneliness that deep thinkers know best. Not the loneliness of an empty room, but the loneliness of standing in the middle of a crowd and still feeling completely invisible. So who exactly is a deep thinker? Look, this isn't a title. It's not some elite category. It's simply people whose minds naturally operate on a different frequency. They don't just hear what you say. They hear what you don't say. They don't just see the surface of a situation. They automatically search for what's underneath. An ordinary conversation with them can turn into a philosophical exploration within minutes. Not because they're trying to make it that way, but because that's simply how their brain connects ideas. And in a society built for speed and surface, that becomes a very heavy thing to carry. Let me describe how modern society actually works. Not to judge it, but to help you understand why it creates such a difficult environment for people with deep inner lives. We live in a world where attention is measured in seconds. Everything is designed for fast consumption. Short videos, clickbait headlines, opinions condensed into 3 words, emotions expressed through emojis. Modern culture doesn't just allow shallowness. It rewards it. The person who speaks fast, sounds confident, and keeps it light gets heard. The person who pauses to think gets labeled slow. And in that environment, the deep thinker begins to shrink. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've tried and discovered that what they want to say doesn't fit the pace of most conversations. They start a sentence and notice the other person's eyes already drifting away. They share a complex thought and receive a shallow response in return. Gradually, they learn to go quiet, not out of shyness, but because they've stopped expecting to truly be heard. Here's what most people don't understand. Their silence isn't a sign of withdrawal. It's the mark of someone who once tried hard to connect and repeatedly found no solid ground to stand on. You might not realize it, but there's a very specific psychological mechanism at work here. When you're a deep thinker, your brain doesn't just process information. It analyzes, compares, questions, searches for contradictions. This means you're spending far more energy in the same situation than the people around you. A social gathering that others experience as relaxation becomes for you an environment that demands constant processing, constant adjustment. Psychology calls this sensory and cognitive overload. It's not that you're weaker. It's that your brain is working harder, going deeper, and therefore needs far more energy to recover. And here's where things get really interesting. When your brain operates at that level consistently, you start noticing something that most people around you simply don't. That most everyday conversations are happening at a very shallow layer compared to what's actually going on inside people. You look at a friend laughing and sense they're avoiding something. You listen to people argue and realize both sides are talking about 2 completely different things without either of them knowing it. You feel the weight of everything left unsaid in a room, more than everything being spoken aloud. And you can't turn that off. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call them T. T is the kind of person everyone loves having around. T listens deeply, asks questions others don't think to ask, remembers details about people's lives that even those people sometimes forget. T's friends always feel genuinely understood when they're together, but when T gets home, T lies down and feels completely empty, not because the evening was bad, but because T gave away so much attention, so much observation, so much empathy, and received so little in return. Not because T's friends are bad people, but because nobody asked T how T was doing. Not in the polite way, in the way that actually wants to know. T carries big questions about the meaning of existence, about why people do what they do, about the hidden fears behind the smallest daily decisions. And T has nowhere to put those questions down. This isn't the story of one unusual person. This is the story of so many people watching this video right now. The problem is, society never teaches us how to connect at a deep level. We're taught social performance, how to say the right things, laugh at the right moments, avoid making others uncomfortable. But we're never taught how to truly listen, how to sit with comfortable silence, how to stay with a difficult emotion without immediately rushing to resolve it. And the deep thinker, whose inner world always operates deeper, keeps searching for something that the people around them were never prepared to offer. This creates an incredibly painful cycle. You want real connection. You try. You realize the conversation isn't going deep enough. You pull back. Others think you're distant. You feel even more alone. And after enough of those cycles, you start to believe the problem is you, that you're too demanding, that you expect too much, that you should just learn to be satisfied with shallower connections. Now, you might be thinking, does that make me arrogant? Like I think I'm deeper than everyone else? And here's what I need to say to you directly. No, absolutely not. Thinking deeply doesn't mean thinking more correctly or being more valuable. It simply means processing the world differently. Someone who doesn't overthink isn't less than you. They might actually live more presently, more comfortably, even more happily. In many situations where the deep thinker gets trapped inside their own head. But let's also be honest. Sometimes what you call deep thinking is actually anxiety in disguise. Sometimes the constant analysis isn't a strength. It's your brain trying to control a world that you learned wasn't safe, unless you stayed on guard. This is the important line. When is your depth a gift? And when is it a weight you're carrying? Without knowing how to put down, there's an image I often return to. When thinking about this, imagine a child growing up in a family where emotions were never spoken aloud, where everything was handled through silence, through pretending nothing happened, through just keep going. That child was never taught to name their own feelings, but they learned, in their own way. They learned to read the room, to know the difference between the dangerous kind of silence and the normal kind, to sense the tension in the air before anyone spoke a single word. That child became a radar system, always observing, always reading, not because they wanted to, but because that was how they survived. And that child grew up, carrying that radar into every room, every relationship, every conversation, still reading the room, still analyzing, still noticing what others walk right past, and still lonely, because no one around them operates that way. No one else had to. And here is where things get truly important. There's a distinction I want you to understand clearly. The difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is when you choose to be alone, because you know it's where you find yourself again. It's a source of energy, not escape. You leave the crowd feeling like you're taking care of yourself. Isolation is different. Isolation is when you're alone, because you no longer believe anyone can truly understand you. When you withdraw, not to recover, but to protect yourself from one more disappointment. And the frightening thing isn't that you enjoy being alone. The frightening thing is not knowing anymore. Whether you're alone because you're at peace or because you've lost faith in the possibility of being understood. The frightening thing isn't that you think too much. The frightening thing is that you were once taught, directly or indirectly, that your depth was a problem to be fixed, rather than a part of you that deserved to be seen. So what do you do with all of this? The first step is to name your loneliness specifically. Not I feel lonely in the broad sense, but what exactly am I lonely for? Because I want conversations that go deeper. Because I want someone genuinely curious about what's happening inside me. Because I want spaces where comfortable silence is also welcome. When you can name what you're missing, you stop feeling like you're broken and start understanding that you've simply been looking for the right thing in the wrong places. The second step, accept that not everyone can meet you at that deeper level. And that doesn't mean they don't care about you. People connect in different ways. Through action, through physical presence, through humor. A lack of depth in a conversation isn't necessarily a lack of care, but it also means you need to intentionally seek out the relationships and spaces where depth is welcome. Not everyone needs to be your closest confidant, but a few people like that change everything. The third step, ask yourself honestly whether you've been hiding your depth. Many deep thinkers learn to make themselves smaller, saying less than they actually think, laughing along at things they don't find funny, steering away from topics that might feel too heavy. And if you've been doing that long enough, you slowly start losing contact with yourself. Try this week, just once, to say something you actually think in a conversation with someone you feel safe with, not to impress them, not to change them, just to remind yourself that your voice is still there. The fourth step, learn the difference between deep thinking and circular thinking. Deep thinking leads somewhere, toward understanding, toward clarity, toward self-awareness. Circular thinking takes you around the same worry, over and over, without ever arriving anywhere. If your thoughts never stop, but never actually go anywhere, that's not depth. That's anxiety, wearing depth's clothes. And now, let me leave you with one thing. The one thing I most want you to carry away from this video. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not strange. Just because you can't find satisfaction in shallow conversations, or because you need silence after being around people, or because you're always searching for something more real in every interaction. Maybe you're simply someone whose mind was never built to live at the surface, and you grew up in a world that didn't have enough space for that. But your journey isn't about becoming shallower, so you fit in better. Your journey is about finding the spaces, the people, the connections, where your depth isn't a burden, but a meeting point. And that journey doesn't begin by searching for someone else. It begins by stopping apologizing for who you are. If this video helped you see some part of yourself more clearly, leave a comment below. What did you recognize about yourself in today's topic? I read every single comment, and often, what you write down there is the very first step toward truly hearing yourself. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper layers of the human mind, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We still have so much to talk about.